So then finally, what about this abuse of power? The abuse of power. Let me address this in a couple of ways briefly. The first is, don't think for a moment that you don't have abuse of power now. Baptist history is littered with the abuse of power facilitated by the voting system. Baptists abuse power every single day. So let's not act like we're so worried about these elders getting all this power because we've got this perfect little system that's working so well right now. I mean, I've told you the Baptist family tree is an inch deep and 10 miles wide because of all the splits. And how do you think those splits happen? Those splits happen because of the abuse of power. Let me give you another number here that I got from this church consulting course that I took that fits in with what we're saying. 1,300 pastors are fired every month without cause. 1,300 pastors are fired every month without cause. What does without cause mean? It means for no reason, for no good reason. What is that but abuse of power? We remember we talked about Larry Hammett, who used the structure of the church to abuse the power that he could gain through it. Now you say 1,300 pastors, that doesn't mean they're all Baptists. Well, you tell me who's the largest denomination in the United States? The Southern Baptist Convention. And tell me about when we add missionary Baptists and independent Baptists and all the other kinds of Baptists, how many of this 1,300 are fired by Baptist congregations? You already have abuse of power, friends. And this is why Satan has got you doing this and using this system. Because ultimately he is the one abusing the power that you have given him. Remember I talked to you, polity is a way to protect you. And we have opened up the doors wide to Satan and said, come on in. But Jesus has answers for this concern. It's a fair concern. It's not an illegitimate concern. I don't mean to make light of it. I'm just simply saying that don't think that you don't already have it. All right? What are Jesus' answers? Well, remember I talked to you about the requirements. I talked to you about the requirements. He has a specific reason that each one of these is in there. Remember, Jesus Christ is an infinite intelligence. When he says to do something and he says, you need to do this, 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 and this, you better do every single one of those because he's thought it through and he's got a reason. Look at these traits. He's already built in so that you get men who aren't likely to abuse power. So the men they can't be violent. They can't have a temper. What do men with tempers tend to do? Try and abuse power when they get mad. He can't be greedy. Why do men try and abuse power? So they can get a hold of money. He has to be gentle. That means he can't be harsh or abusive. What's the word? He can't be abusive. If the Lord's telling you that he can't be abusive, he's not very likely to abuse his power because that's not the kind of man that he is. And he can't be newly converted. He can't be some guy who just came in off the street a year ago. Because that kind of a person is going to be tempted to abuse power if you give it to them. You see, he's built in if we will follow his directives. And then secondly, the Lord commands elders how they are to use their authority. Let's go back to this 1 Peter passage very quickly. I already read most of this to you. Let me read it to you again and add some of the stuff that I took out. Shepherd the flock of God, which is among you, 1 Peter 5, 2 and 3, serving as overseers, not by compulsion but willingly, which means the elder cannot be forced to do it. The man has to want to do it. Not for dishonest gain. He's saying you don't use your power to improve your financial situation, nor as being lords over those entrusted to you. He's teaching the elders who are supposed to know the word and be apt to teach. He's saying, look, here's the deal. You are not to be a lord, a master, a tyrant over these people. These are my people. But be examples to them. But none of this means that the elders don't have authority. None of this means that the elders don't be able to say, look, we're not doing this anymore. Or you're not doing this anymore. They have that authority, even though they are not to be abusing it. In my experience, the problems that you would have with an elder-led, a multiple pastor congregation are not going to be abuse of power. Most of the time when I talk to people who have multiple pastors. Most of them don't, but when I ask them, they're having some trouble in their church, and I say, are you using multiple pastors? And they say, yes. Almost always when they're having problems, they have not applied Christ's design properly. They have not kept His guidelines. And there are two ways that I see it happen. And these are the more likely errors that you're going to find if you go to multiple pastors. Not the error of abuse of power. They don't meet the qualifications. The churches that have trouble with multiple pastors, you usually have one guy that meets the qualifications, and the rest of the elders are not qualified. They're not required to meet the qualifications. Well, then what do you have in the church? You have a bunch of men who are not qualified, who are trying to make decisions for the church. Of course you're going to have problems with them. What do you expect? You're going to have a bunch of fleshly men in there. And the second is the whole issue of shared authority. Remember, I told you that we're not to have one guy over a bunch of other guys. We're to have all on the same playing field. When I see problems with churches who have multiple pastors, they've set one guy up and he's got 51% of the power in the elders and everybody else has 49, and they are running around trying to get him to do what he's supposed to do. He has too much power. But that's not a problem with multiple pastors. That's a problem with setting it up outside of Christ's guidelines. You see, this really doesn't come down to you saying, oh, Wes, I could see how that could work. I could see how having multiple pastors would give us less trouble than elders. Or someone says, no, I think if we had voting, we're going to have less trouble. That's not the question at all. The question that you have to wrestle with is you wrestle with implementing this in your church and moving towards it, is whose wisdom are you going to trust? I have shown you that the Scripture very clearly over and over shows multiple pastors, deacons in submission to those pastors, and that those pastors have the final say. The question that you really have to wrestle with is, are you going to trust Christ and follow and make those changes? Or are you going to continue to trust yourself and your own wisdom and live under this system that is destroying Baptist churches today? I hope that you will turn to Christ, obey Him, and have the courage to trust His wisdom and do it His way.